Masechta Avoda Zara, Daf Lamed Ches Amud Aleph, is starting from the second line from the top. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak Amar Rav. Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak said to Rav Kol Adach Meishu Chai. Whatever could be eaten in a raw state, Ein by Mishum Bishul Eivich Yechavim. Doesn't have the Isa of Bishulakum. Mesura Masna Hachi. In Surah, they taught like this, like we just learned. If it could be eaten raw, then there's no Bishulakum. But for Medisa Masna Hachi. And for this, however, in Medisa, they taught differently. Amar Rav Shmuel Rav Yitzchak Amar Rav. Kol shein nechal al shulchan melachim lelapis bayis hapas, whatever is not eaten at the shulchan of the kings, at the table of the kings, that is together with the bread, eaten together with bread, ein by mishum mishulei v'gechavim. There's no bishulakim. In fact, you want to what's the difference if it could be eaten a raw state like the first gisa, or according to the second gisa, that anything that's not on Shulchan Malachim that doesn't have the Isa of Bisulakim. Says the difference will be small fish and mushrooms and porridge or cereal. So these are items that are not eaten raw. So therefore, if it's not eaten raw, they should have a Isa of Bisulakim according to the first Gisa, because since it cannot be eaten raw, and the guy cooked it, has a dinner bishulakim, but according to the Girsa, that it's not, only those things that are on Shulchan Malachim are choshuv to be considered as bishulakim. Since these are items that are not on Shulchan Malachim, they don't have the Isa of bishulakim. Amar Avasi Amar Rav. Avasi said to him, Rav Dogim Kitana Malachim Ein B'hem Mishum Bishulei Yechavim. Small salted fish are not in the Isa Bishulakum, being that they are ready to eat even without them cooking. It's from the being salted, it's already ready. Since they can be eaten raw, so without the bishul, therefore it doesn't have the Isa Bishulakum. Rav Yosef says, therefore, him Slolan. If a guy roasted it, you can rely by Yom Tov, which falls on an Erev Shabbos. In order to cook from Yom Tov for Shabbos, you need Erev Tashilin. So he can rely, and the Erev Tashilin is cooked food. So Mishum Erev Tashilin, if the guy cooked this, and it was able to be eaten because it was salted without the cooking. So therefore it's going to be Raya for Erev Tashilin. And even though the Koy cooked it, but it's not Bishalakim because it was fit to eat, because it was salted. And if the Goy made the fish into a schnitzel usher, it's forbidden to eat. It's forbidden to eat because of bishalakim, because the flour that how you made the schnitzel, there was a mix of flour, and flour, the way it's raw, you're unable to eat it. So therefore, it has a din of bishalakim. In fact, you might have itself understood. I would have thought, if not for the words of Rav Yosef, that the fats of the fish, that's the main part of the schnitzel. And since by the fats of the fish there's no isa of bishlakum, because salty fish could be eaten raw, therefore even though there was a flour mixed in it, that's a tuffle, that's secondary to the fish. And I would have thought that one who eats it, it's still mutbachila because the main part is the fish. He comes to teach us, know that the flour is the main part of the food. And mitzad the flour, there is bishalakim because you cannot eat it raw. And therefore the machol, this fish that was fried together with flour is going to be asur. Bagam, a guy that had lit up put on fire in the whole meadow on fire, and there were grasshoppers there roasted in this meadow. All those grasshoppers that were singed and roasted in the fire are usur. In fact, how's the case talking about? If you're saying he didn't know which ones are the Torah, the Kafish, and which ones are the Tamei, why did he Rav Reiner chap on a case after by a guy? I feel Yisrael, even if the Yid would have lit the meadow on fire, Nami, the grasshopper should be also, because you don't know which one. You can't recognize the difference between those that are Torah and those that are Tamei. Allah says only because of Bishul Akum. Ki hai gavna mi aser. In such a case, if you knew which ones are Torah, and the whole problem was because of Bishul Akum, is it then also? This guy who had singed the head of a Geshachna animal to remove the hair, that's why he cinched it. Says it's permitted to eat from it, even of the tips of the ears. So we see, since his kavanah was just to remove the hair, not to roast the meat, and so you say it's permitted, even though the guy roasted the meat. Here too, in the case of the meadow, we should say the same thing. Since his kavanah was to uncover the ground of the meadow, his kavanah wasn't to roast the grasshoppers, so therefore the grasshoppers should be mutter to eat, because only if the kavanah was to cook it, then it should be also. Here his kavanah was not to cook it. Really, it's talking about a case he did not know the difference between Torah and Tamei. Yes, the kasha, why do you have to chop on dafka case by a guy? Why, even by a yid, it would be awesome if he can't recognize the difference between those that are Tamei and Torah. And you want to Ma'aser Shahaya, it's a story. And that story was was with a guy. Zog, you want to go from Amfrigela and this guy that singed the head of a geshacht animal, he's permitted to eat from the tip of the ear of this animal. Avinu says, therefore, in a case where a guy who throws a piece of wood, a wet peg into the oven, and puts on the fire to dry out the peg, and he had earlier buried there a gourd in the oven, a food in the oven before the oven was fired. And the gourd is now cooked through the guy, through the guy that he fired the oven to dry up the peg. Shaper dami. It's still mutter to eat the gourd. It's a dava pasha because it's similar to the case of Rabbi Yechilin. What's the chiddush in the words of Ravina? You might have said that in the case of the guy, his kavanah was to cook, to drive the peg, but his kavanah was to cook. Therefore comes and tells us, since the guy's kavanah was to strengthen the peg, the keli, by drying it out, that's not going to be considered as cooking for food. It should be cooking for food. If a yid placed meat on top of the coals, and a guy came and turned it over, mutter, then the meat is permitted. In fact, how's the case talking about it? If you say that if the guy had not turned it over, it would have anyway cooked. So then the guy didn't really accomplish anything. Pshita, of course it's going to be mutter. It's the Yid's cooking that made it happen. Allah, rather, It's talking about a case that that if the guy would have not turned it over, it would have not been cooked. Why should it be mutter? It's a case of bishulakim. So the case is talking about the that if the guy wouldn't have turned it over, it would have taken 2 hours. But now that the guy turned it over, it's going to cook much faster, an hour faster. I would have thought that making the cooking faster is considered a chashva thing, and it's considered as the guy cooking it. Kamash Malon comes the Gemara and teaches us, no, it's not. Since it would have cooked on its own, we don't care that he made it faster. It's still not considered as bishulakim. So Gemara v'hama Rabbi Yasi Rabbi Yechnen. Rabbi Yasi had said in the name of Rabbi Yechnen, Kol shehu ma'achal b'bendusai. Any food that has been cooked for bendusai is ganovim. That banditin ganovim. Well, because of their they don't know when the next robbery will take place, or people are looking at them, so they cook the foods only a third of the usual time. So what's the din over there? In Kol Shu Ma'ach Ben Nusa, he says, Ein by Mishum Mishuli Yechavna. Anything that's already cooked a third, it doesn't have a Isa Bishalakum. But if it's not cooked a third, like the food of the robbers, then there is the Isa of Bishalakum. That's what he's asking. Yes, even though the tafshel would have been mismashal by itself, and the guy just made it faster. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says kiruv bishul of a guy doesn't make it aser. So it's a kasha. You said it doesn't. The hastening of the food, making it cook faster, and if they wouldn't have hastened it, it would have cooked on its own anyway. From this Rabasi Rabbi Yechon, it comes out only if it was cooked with like Ma'achman Nesai, which is a shlish bishulei. Then there's no issue of bishulakim. But if it wasn't cooked in Ma'achman Nesai, even though it would have cooked on its own, according to Rabasi Rabbi Yechon, he says there is bishulakim, and we said there isn't. And the Gemara Hasam going to Eser b'silsa. There in Rabasi's psak is referring to a case where one placed the partially cooked food in a basket, and we would not have cooked further if not for the goy's action, since it was in a basket. So then, yes, only then there is the bishulakim. But Hasam can go to Silsa. There in Avasi's ruling, it's talking about where he placed partially cooked I'm sorry, and the guy put it into the tanner. So there, it's not going to cook on its own because it was placed in a basket where it wouldn't have cooked anymore. And the guy cooked it. If not for the guy doing it would have never cooked. And that's why it's a bishulakim. Tanya Navi Hachbilin Nabraisa. Similarly, Maniach Yisol Basal Gabir Cholim. A Jew can place meat on top of coals, and allow a guy to come and turn it until the Yid comes back from the shul or from the Beis HaMedrash. And he doesn't have to be concerned. I'm sorry, and he doesn't have to be concerned. Similarly, a woman could place a pot on top of the oven, and allow the goya to come, and stir with a spoon until she comes back from the bathhouse or from the shul. Others say it's from the market. And she doesn't have to be concerned. Meaning, so we see as long as the Jew begins the cooking, so it could be completed even by a goy. So we see it follows exactly like we said before, that if it's able to cook on its own, it doesn't matter how much it was cooked, it doesn't matter how much the goy is working on making it go faster, it's still not going to be considered as bishul lakum. What is that? If a goy placed the meat on the coals and the yid turned it, this could be a kavachema. If when the completion is done to a goy, it's permitted, and the ik is the completion. That's where the Isser Chasnas takes place. When the goy finishes the Michael and makes it into a Michael, that's what makes the whole party look at the goyim. So so especially if a goy, if a goy finishes and it was started initially by a yid, we say we don't have to worry. If it was completed by a yid, that's the ikar, the completion of the Isser Chasna. For sure it's going to be mutter because for sure there's no Isser Chasnas there. Because the idea of Isser Chasnas is looked at when do the people look at the party, look up to the person when he finishes the food, cooked food. And we said even though a guy finishes the food where people look at him or look at her, whoever's doing the food, could lead to intermarriage. But since the Yid started the cooking, we say it won't lead to intermarriage even though the guy finished. So if the Yid finishes, there won't be a chash of coming to intermarriage. Itnam, he also had learned. Rabbi Chana said the name Rabbi Yechon. Whether a guy first placed the meat on the coals and the Yid turned the bench, or whether the Jew first placed the meat on the coals and the guy turned the mutar, it's going to be mutar. It's not going to be considered bishul lakim until the beginning and the end was done through the guy. Sagt the Gemara, Amar Avina Hilchsa, the halacha is if the shaga offer Yisrael in a case of bread where a guy fired up the oven and the Yid baked the bread in it, or where a Jew fired up the oven and the guy baked the bread. Even if the guy fired up the oven and the guy baked the bread in it, but a Yid came and stirred up the coals while the bread was baking, shapadami is still, you can eat the bread. So you bought a dog maliyach, a salty fish. Chizkiah shadi, Chizkiah was matir, Rabbi Yechon asa did. Beyetz luya, roasting an egg. Okay, so 1 minute. So we said it was machlekes. Rashi says Rabbi Yechon holds that Chum weren't. Rabbi Yechon who says it's aser by the salty fish. The Chacham were not mechalik. In the Gezerah Bishul Akum, and there were guys even by Bishul that was not through a fire, even through salt. According to Rabbi Yechon, just like salt of a guy is considered as Bishul, without the fire it asks it, so too is by pickling, the same thing will be. Okay, what about the shell of an egg? Beyatzluya, a roasted egg, Bar Kapara Shari, Bar Kapara says it's mutter, because Bar Kapara says that it has a shell, which is a barrier between it and the food. So therefore it's mutter, but Rabbi Yechon says it's still going to be aser. Since the guy cooked it, it's aser, even though he didn't touch the food itself, the portion of the food itself, there's a shell. So when Abdi came and he said, Chizkiah Bar Kapara Shari. Chizkiah Bar Kapara both said it's mutter. Rabbi Yechon also. But Rabbi Yochanan also did. Rabbi Chia Parvo Ikla Levei Reish Gelusa. Rabbi Chia Parvo visited the house of the Reish Gelusa. The Reish Gelusa was the officially recognized civil authority over the Yidden in Bavel, and he was the son of David HaMelech. Anyway, it says over there, Amalahu, he said to them, Chisku Bakapara Shor with Rabbi Yochanan, Chisku Bakapara said about the Beit Sluya that it's mutter, and Rabbi Yochanan answered it, and he passed him, and the Reish Gelusa said, and the opinion of the authority is when it's two against one, the Allah is like the two. Rabbi said to them, don't listen to the Reish Gelusa. Abaya said, Rabbi Yochanan, the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan, and an egg roasted by an idol worshipper is also ashkei na goita the chalav v'nach nafshei. So they gave Rav Zid a cup of vinegar to drink with poison in it, and he passed away. So they killed him for it. That's what he brings down, that they killed him for it. It says they were shoyim. Rabbanim gelernt in a brayse hakafrisen, husks that cover over the berries, hakaflutes and leeks. Matalia is, that's what's the name. It's called amatalia. Some say it's the hay of this word is a part of the root hamatalia, whereas some say no, it's just matalia. Nevertheless, matalia v'achamim and hot water v'akloyes and the parched foods shalahem of a goy mutarim are permitted because they're able to be eaten raw. Beyetzlu yasura, a roasted egg of a goy is aser. Shaman, Rabbi Negei a goy sheshaman. Rabbi Yehuda hanasi ubeis din nin olav itiru. Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya, that's who it is, the grandson of Rabbi, and his court voted in that it's mutter. Tanya, it was learned in the Braisa, he hemtalya, he pshilya, he shiasa. Amatalia is the same as psilya, which is the same as she also. Like, what am she also? What is she also? It is already 40 years since the incident of coming out of Mitzrayim. The day Amar, Rabbi Chana says, Hashisen Shnein the Nafgai of the Mitzrayim. It is already 60 years since they came out of Mitzrayim. So the Gemara is going to go into explaining that they're not arguing. Like Pligi, we're not arguing. Ma'vishnei, one master refers to his years, and Ma'vishnei, and one master refers to his years. That is, there is no machlekes. Both agree that the incident happened in the same time. Rabbi Yochanan reported the incident 40 years after it happened, and Rabbi Chana made his comment 20 years later, which is 60 years. They brought the seed of cress, and the seed of flax, the shavlilta, and the seed of fenugreek. And soaked them together in lukewarm water, and left it until it began to grow. And they brought new barrels, and filled them up with water, and soaked clay into them, and the seeds attached to the clay. And they entered into the Obani, and they entered into the bathhouse. Zog the Gemara, and by the time they came out of the bathhouse, the seed had put forth shoots. And they took them, ate from them, whereupon they became freezing cold from the hot bath by eating those foods from the hair of their heads till the toenails of their feet. Rav Chanina said to me words, meaning the report is just words. It cannot be true. It's impossible that the seeds should give off shoots in such a short time. Others say that it should cool them off so to make them so cold. And others say, as the Rav Ashi had reported up in the name of Chanina, that Rav Chanina said to him with words, it was done through kishuf, and that's the only way it was able to be done. And regarding the date mark of Goyim, if the hot water was boiled in a very big pot, also then it's forbidden. But if it was boiled in a small pot, then it's mutter. And why in a big pot is it going to be also? Because in a big pot there's a soon the Gemara is going to say what is considered as a small pot. Any dry bird which is very small cannot enter inside this pot. Meaning that the opening of the pot is so narrow that the point of the dry bird cannot fit through it. Pots with such narrow openings are not used for cooking non-kosher food. Okay, maybe I should speak it out now. A big pot, the problem is with a big pot, the big pot is what they cook in, and therefore whatever's in the walls, if you heat it up, will come out, there'll be a emission of all the Isadika food that was in the walls of the pot into the food of the pot. But a small pot that they don't use, you don't have to worry about it. In fact, and here we gave the size of a small pot that the opening is so small that a dry bird cannot fit. But maybe they dismembered it and placed it into the pot. So it's shaykh that they cut the bird into pieces and placed them through the narrow mouth of the pot. So you did have even from the non-kosher bird in there, and it was cooked there. Says the Gemara, rather, it means a small pot that in any way that the head of the dry bird cannot enter inside. Whether it's a big pot or a small pot, it is mutter. So you want to like kasha? That's not a question. The first brayso, it goes according to the Mandama who says that whatever Isa that is in the wall, that if the mass lasts after 24 hours, is bad for the food that's in the pot, and anything that's bad for the food in the pot gives a bad taste into the food that's in the pot, is aser, and that's why he asered the big pots. But this brayso that says it's mutter holds that anything that will give a bad taste to the food that's in the pot from the wall, from the whatever is absorbed in the walls, then it's mutter. So Hi, Mishcha Shalika, this boiled water of the Armenians also is also to what are we concerned about over here? If you are answering because of the possibility that the guy mixing forbidden wine into it, there's nothing to worry about. Mishra Sari. The oil surely will become spoiled, so they wouldn't mix wine with it. And if the Isa is because they cook foods of the Goyim, that's not a concern. Because it's able to be eaten in a raw state, so there's no bishalakum. And if you wish to ask it because of the emissions of the kalim from the pots of the Goyim, that they cooked oil, it was the pots of the goyim, that's not a concern. Because whatever they had in the walls of the pot is a bad taste for the food in the pot, and it's mutter. So there's no reason to asa the boiled oil of our Armenians, and therefore it is mutter. What is the halacha of these cooked dates of the Armenians? Regarding the sweet ones, you have no shaila. The vade shari, of course, it's mutter, because they're able to be eaten raw. Regarding the bitter ones, also you shouldn't have a question. The vade asira, for sure it's mutter, aser, because you can't eat it raw. But where is the shaila when it's in between? That's not sweet or bitter. What's the halacha? What is your shaila? The Rebbe also, for Rebbe Asit, Umanu, Levi, and who is that Rab Asi referred to as Rebbe? That's Levi. Shisisa, so the Gemara examines the halacha regarding another food. Shisisa, what's Shisisa cooked by a goy? Rav Shari. Rav says it's mutter. Avoda Shmuel, but Levi Asi. Whereas Avoda, the father of Shmuel, and Levi aser it. Shisisa, I forgot to say, is a food that was made with the flour, kernels of flour that were parched in the oven. Sometimes it's made from flour parched, from flour of parched lentils. So since the lentils or flour is too sweet, so they would use vinegar to mix with it. So regarding this shasisa, wheat, barley, everybody agrees it's a mutter. But why is it going to be mutter? Because vinegar is not normally placed in that shasisa. But regarding shasisa made of lentils, everybody agrees it's going to be asa because you need vinegar in it. When did they argue? Regarding shasisa made of lentils with water, which does not contain any forbidden ingredients. No less, Shmuel's father and Levi hold that where goiza lentil shasisa containing water because of possible confusion, because he got mixed up with this lentil shasisa containing vinegar, and one says no, we're not goiza. And others say the maya regarding shasisa made of lentil with water. Everybody agrees it's us. Keep pleading. What do they argue? Regarding wheat and barley, Shmuel's father and Levi hold that we are goiza wheat or barley of shasisa, that it should be asa because of the possible of the lentil variety of shasisa. And the other Tana holds, meaning Rav holds, that we do not make a gzeira regarding wheat and barley of shasisa on the account of lentil shasisa. Rav that said, today meaning shasisa shad bazilei hagilad leDavid. Bazilai, the Giladi sent two types of shasisa to Melech David. Dichsiv mishka v'sapis uklitza echifim userim v'kebel v'kali ufel v'adash v'kali. It says bedding bowls, pottery, wheat, barley, flour, parched kernels, beans, lentils, and parched kernels. Each of the two references to parched kernels represent a different type of shasisa, which is made from flour of parched kernels. One was from the wheat and the barley, which was listed before. The first one, okay, and the other was made from the lentils. Zag the Gemara, we'll stop over here. Zag the Gemara returns to the kosher shasisa. It says nowadays it is the minig that they take out the baskets upon baskets full of goyish shasisa to the markets of Nada, v'leis the chayish laha the Avoda Shmuel v'Levi, and no one is concerned with that chumrah of Shmuel's father and Levi. Rather, the Yidden bought the wheat and barley shasisa from the goyim.